On today's show, we're going to go around the conference as we get you an injury update over at Auburn, several SEC finalists named for the Outland Trophy, and much more there. Also, college football analyst Taylor McHargue will join us to discuss the head coaching opening over at LSU, as well as Alabama's chances to still make the playoff. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On SEC. Great to have you guys along. Today's show is brought to you by McDonald's. Of course, McDonald's proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. Big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. And as always, I'm loving it. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And give me a follow at Chris Gordy on Twitter and follow the show at Locked On SEC. Plenty to cover. Let's jump into it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Intercepted. Takes the handoff. Throws in. What a catch.
Around the conference.
And we start over at Auburn, as they will be without one key defender for the first half of Saturday's game against South Carolina, but could be getting another one back. According to AL.com, edge defender Romello Height is expected to play Saturday after missing the previous 3 games. Height's return would boost an Auburn defense that will be missing T.D. Moultrie for the first half of the game against the Gamecocks. Moultrie was called for targeting in the second half of the loss to Mississippi State. Height, he has played in 7 games this season, recording 17 tackles plus 2 quarterback hurries. Auburn will also be without kicker Anders Carlson, who is traveling, or as it travels to Columbia this Saturday. Of course, not the only key injury for the Tigers. TJ Finley will be playing at quarterback in place of Bo Nix, but Carlson, like Nix, is finished for the season. Senior underwent surgery to fix a tear in his ACL in his left knee. It's possible he has played his last game for Auburn, but of course, the decision will be made very soon if he wants to come back for a 6-year of eligibility or if he wants to jump to the NFL. We do know who will split time at the kicking role for the Tigers this Saturday. Ben Patton and Evan McGuire will share the duties, according to Brian Harsin. Patton is a 3rd-year sophomore, the backup to Carlson. Saw some time in 2019 against Samford. McGuire is a redshirt freshman. He has yet to see any collegiate action. 6 semifinalists have been named for the Outland Trophy, 3 of them coming from the SEC. We've got Big Jordan Davis from Georgia, also Evan Neal from Alabama, and Darian Kennard from Kentucky. Of course, every year the Outland Trophy is given to the best interior lineman on either side of the ball in college football. And in my opinion, you can't go wrong with any of those guys, Jordan Davis, Evan Neal, or Darian Kennard. Still a lot of talk out there among college football analysts as to who will be the next LSU head coach. Some people thinking Jimbo Fisher or Lane Kiffin. But on the ESPN College Football Podcast, David Pollack talking with Reese Davis. David Pollack says he thinks LSU should go after Baylor's Dave Aranda. Reese Davis, his College Game Day co-host, made the case for Alabama offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien. Davis even said, quote, "I think Bill O'Brien is going to be the next head coach at LSU." I wonder if if he has a close relationship with Scott Woodward, if they can maybe make that work. Bill O'Brien could be the next LSU head coach. Ahead of Saturday's game with the Arkansas Razorbacks, Alabama head coach Nick Saban talking about the Arkansas defense and especially Hogs D lineman John Ridgeway. Saban said, "I think their front is really, really good. They're active, they're physical, they're hard to block. They do a good job of rushing, do a great job of executing the defense." He said Ridgeway is physical, hard to block. Razorbacks are currently ranked the number 37 in the country in total defense. Meanwhile, Lane Kiffin's name not only been connected to LSU, but now, according to radio personality Andy Slater, Miami enters the mix. According to a tweet from Slater on Thursday, Kiffin, he says Kiffin would be open to leaving Ole Miss for Miami should the Hurricanes move on from Manny Diaz. The Hurricanes have not parted ways with Manny Diaz as of now. There's a lot that has to happen if Lane Kiffin were to be the next head coach at Miami. Since we're going to have 2 segments with our buddy Taylor McHargue coming up next, figure we'll jump right into our SEC Week 12 lines here, according to BetOnline.ag. We'll get 3 of them out the way because there are no lines on these games. Charleston Southern is at number 1 Georgia. Prairie View A&M is at Texas A&M. And Tennessee State is at Mississippi State. No line on any of those games, but we expect all 3 of those teams to get victories, Georgia, A&M, and Mississippi State. So we'll move on from those. Let's jump into the games we do have lines on from betonline.ag. First up, we have New Mexico State is at Kentucky. It's 12 Eastern on the SEC Network. Kentucky is a 36.5-point favorite over New Mexico State. Nothing against Kentucky. And look, we just saw New Mexico State get embarrassed by Alabama. I just think that's a lot of points for Kentucky. Their offense has been inconsistent at times this year. I think Kentucky wins, and I think they won big. I think they just don't cover the 36.5. Give me New Mexico State plus 36.5. 4 o'clock Eastern on the SEC Network. We'll have Florida at Missouri. Florida is a 8.5-point road favorite. Look, I know Missouri has stunk at times. They played much better defense last week against South Carolina. And Florida, look, the offense looked good against Samford, but the defense was god-awful. I think Tyler Beatty's going to have a day. I think he's going to run all over this Florida defense, and I do not trust Florida to cover the 8.5. Florida may very well win, but I'm taking Missouri plus the 8.5. I just cannot trust Dan Mullen and the Gators right now. The other afternoon game, we get Arkansas at Alabama. It's a 2:30 Central kick on CBS. Alabama, a 20.5-point home favorite. As much as I love Sam Pittman, I love the job he's done this year at Arkansas. I think Bama's out to prove a point. They win this game, they lock their spot in the SEC championship game and win the SEC West, and they're still playing for a possible spot in the college football playoff. I think Bama plays big, and I think they win big. I think Bryce Young and the offense put up a bunch of points, and I think Bama covers the 20.5 over Arkansas. If this game were in Fayetteville, I may think a little bit differently, but give me Bama minus the 20.5 at home. Into the night games at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. It is Auburn at South Carolina. South Carolina, a 7.5-point home underdog to Auburn. So many pieces here. TJ Finley starting his first game of the season at Auburn. Auburn's without their starting kicker. I'm going to take South Carolina and the points. I think Auburn can still win this game, but if they win it, I think they win it ugly. I think they win it close. Give me South Carolina plus the 7.5. But South Carolina's got to get back to running the football well, which they've done a little bit better job of in the past couple weeks. Also at 7:30 Eastern on ESPNU, it'll be South Alabama at Tennessee. I've seen a little bit of South Alabama this year. Not very impressive. They struggled with App State last week. Tennessee, we know how much better the offense has been under Josh Heupel. Even the defense has had some moments as of late. I'm going to take Tennessee minus the 28 at home. Any other year, I think South Alabama could cover those points, but I think Heupel and the offense back at home play much better. Give me Tennessee minus 28. Vanderbilt is at Ole Miss at 6:30 Central on the SEC Network. Ole Miss, a 36-point home favorite. It's a lot of points. And Vandy, at times, the defense has played okay, but I just think Matt Corral's final game in Oxford and a lot of it, it's senior night, last home game for Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels. I think they want to run up the score. I think Jerry and Ely and the running backs have a day, and I think Ole Miss covers the 36 at home. Lastly, UL Monroe is at LSU. That's an 8 p.m. Central kickoff on ESPN2, a late-night game in Death Valley. I'm going to take LSU minus the 29. I think LSU, obviously the offense struggled a little bit last week with Garrett Nussmeier playing most of the game, the true freshman, but sounds like they're going back to Max Johnson this week. I think they're going to execute. The passing game is going to work against UL Monroe. The running game, Ty Davis-Price is going to have a big day. I think LSU covers the 29, but covers it late. And there you go. Those are our SEC Week 12 predictions and picks. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. When we return, we're going to catch up with Taylor McHargue, college football analyst. We'll talk some SEC with him. That's next. This episode of Locked On SEC is brought to you guys by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect. It's a place where classmates meet up for a study group, knowing they're going to have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries, McFlurries. Win or lose, it's where teammates can go, the home team, the away team, they can go to recharge. And of course, as I always say, every SEC campus either has a McDonald's on campus or just off campus nearby, and it is a great place to stop on a long road trip, rest your legs, and refuel. So head on over to your local McDonald's, refuel, reconnect, and enjoy some awesome, tasty food. And as always with McDonald's, I'm loving it. See you guys at McDonald's today. More along here, Locked On SEC, and one of our favorite segments. Just about every week, we catch up with our buddy Taylor McHargue, college football analyst. And Taylor joins us now. Let's just jump into it. Taylor, you were in the Austin area, Texas, the Longhorns. They're going to be coming to the SEC very soon. Steve Sarkisian, very much underachieving in year one so far with the Longhorns. They lost to Kansas last week. Before we get into the SEC questions, what is going on with the Longhorns there in Austin in your mind?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think the bigger issue is there is a culture problem at the University of Texas, and it's been there for a while. And it is, we've talked on here about the difference in the Big 12 versus the SEC and how much, their slogan, it just means more. Well, if you go to Baton Rouge on a Saturday night, it is, these people live and breathe their college football. It matters to them. That's not the case at Texas. No matter how much they want it to be and how much money they throw at it, you can't fake if you actually care. And there's a reason why after they've had a loss or two and they have Iowa State come to town, it's nowhere near a sellout. And at halftime, you got to half the student section leaves because you're in downtown Austin and there's a lot of stuff to do here. It's similar to USC when they're not playing well. There's a lot of things to do in Southern California. You got the same thing here in Austin. The second piece, they have not hit on a quarterback in a long time. And that is a hard part. One of the hardest parts of recruiting in college football is you can solve a lot of problems. Look at Kenny Pickett right now at Pitt. I mean, Pat Narduzzi hit a home run and got lucky that his quarterback wanted to come back in a year where he didn't necessarily have to. Go down the list in college football, Alabama, in the second half of this crazy run, they went from, first part of Saban's tenure, struggling to get a decent quarterback, winning a lot of games, knockdown dragouts. And then they start getting guys like Tua and Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts. And you're like, man, now these guys are unstoppable. Texas hasn't hit on a quarterback in a long time. And a lot has been made of the guys that they've let slip through the cracks, quarterbacks that come from the state of Texas and leave and go play elsewhere. And it is really difficult it's almost impossible unless you do what Georgia's done this year and you build a defense that's, kind of out of this world. It is really difficult to make it to that caliber, be a playoff team and a top 10 team when your quarterback play has been what Texas has been for, going back to when I was playing and they missed on Garrett Gilbert.
Talking with Taylor McHargue. Taylor, I'm curious, the other school down the road in College Station, Texas A&M, obviously Jimbo's done a good job building them up. They finally break through. They beat Alabama this year, but there's no payoff. They lost their third game already. They're not, it's another year of not winning the SEC West, not getting to the SEC title game. We're a decade now into the Aggies being in the SEC, and they still have yet to win the SEC or even win the West. I'm just curious, the rumors, we know Scott Woodward, he's the athletic director at LSU. He brought Jimbo over to A&M. There's a bunch of rumors he's talking with Jimbo, maybe trying to pull him over to Baton Rouge and go to LSU. I know Jimbo said this week, man, I'm about to sign the #1 recruiting class. Why would I leave here? Well, what's silly about that statement is if he were to leave immediately after the LSU A&M game and go to LSU, you don't think some of those kids are going to jump ship and follow him to LSU? But I say all that to say, where is Jimbo right now and A&M? And I mean, in my mind, where the past 3 coaches at LSU have all won championships, wouldn't he have a better shot maybe winning a title going to Baton Rouge just because of the talent that Louisiana brings in, and then you have no other in-state school that you compete with for recruits there?
Yeah, for Jimbo Fisher, all of these coaches do the song and dance, right? When they get asked these questions, what are they going to say? Like, yeah, my agent's working the phones like a you-know-what, and there's a chance I leave. They're not going to say that. He's going to – same thing he said when he's at Florida State. Hey, I'm at Florida State. I'm not going anywhere. And then he leaves like a month later. I may be naive, and I may end up looking like a fool here in about a month, but I believe him when he says, we like it here. I'm not going anywhere. I think part of it is it's such an enormous buyout that even at a place like LSU, are you going to be able to drum up the cash that you would need to get him? Probably. They probably could in Baton Rouge. But I think it's more about you can get players all over the country, but especially in that region like you talked about at an LSU. But if you don't, it's a much shorter leash there. You saw it with Ed O. You go from a national championship to being fired in a season and a half. I think he would be a fool to leave College Station because they love him and he gets whatever he wants. It's unlimited resources. And you get them to an SEC West championship and you get them to the SEC championship, he could stay there as long as he wants. And in the state of Texas, I know you talked about LSU, you're it in the state of Louisiana. Well, if you look in the state of Texas right now, they're winning the recruiting battle. I mean, they're ahead of, if you had a kid right now say you rather go to Texas or Texas A&M right now, I think you'd be crazy not to go play for Jimbo and what they're building at A&M as opposed to what's going on in Austin. So I think he's got the leg up in recruiting there. I think he's got the momentum on his side. He's got one side of him a national championship caliber. I mean, I think they're close on the defensive side to being that level of unit. It's the offense, and specifically, again, talking about quarterbacks, Zach Calzada's probably not your guy. I think when I say not your guy, to lead you to where they want to be. The performance against Alabama is looking like that was a flash in the pan and may end up being the best game of his career. But they're going to need to hit on somebody else. If it's Haynes King, when he gets healthy, maybe next season he proves. But that's now they go play an Ole Miss defense that really a disappointing performance for A&M against them in a game that you thought would be closer, really more of a shootout than it ended up being. But all that to say, I don't think he's going anywhere. I also think he'd be crazy to leave right now because, again, that leash in Baton Rouge, you've got 2, maybe 3 seasons. And if you're not getting them where they want to go, you're out.
All right, more with our buddy Taylor McHargue here in just a second. Reminding you guys about BetOnline.ag. They're back and better than ever. New website, new interface, start of basketball season underway. Whether it's college basketball, betting on the SEC hoops games, or you want to get in on some of these final couple weeks of college football, bowl action, BetOnline remains your number one spot for all things basketball and football the rest of this season. Head on over to their website. You can do so on your mobile device or laptop, desktop, whatever. Sign up today. If you've never signed up, you can receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use our promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON. That'll get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit from basketball, football, boxing, UFC. Don't wait to take advantage of their amazing offers available for the rest of this year. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Of course, the end of the year, that means a lot of you trying to get into shape, starting to look better, want to look good for New Year's. Let Built Bar help you guys out. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. If you haven't tried them by now, you're missing out. They call it a protein bar, but it doesn't taste like a protein bar. It doesn't taste chalky or waxy or hard to swallow like some of those other protein bars you find out there. A Built Bar is covered in 100% real chocolate. It is soft, and when you bite into it, you know you're tasting something different. Built Bars are low in carb, low in calorie, low in sugar, high in protein where it matters. So all the healthy benefits on top of just being purely delicious, and so many flavors, from the coconut almond, the salty caramel, the mint brownie, which is my personal favorite. Try them all at Built.com. And of course, this month, Built is coming up with some new limited flavors all the time. So check back on their website, Built.com, and see what new ones they got up there. You don't want to miss out. Go to Built.com, use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your first order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15. Get 15% off at Built.com. Try them today. One more segment with our buddy Taylor McHargue, college football analyst. And Taylor, thanks for holding. Let's jump right back into it. Based on the college football openings out there, if I gave you LSU, TCU, Washington State, and USC, which job of those do you think is the most attractive currently as an opening?
Between LSU, TCU, Washington State, and USC, I would say LSU because you're going to be given everything you could possibly want. You've got a passionate fan base, and you play in the best conference in college football. Behind that, I would say it's USC. But the trouble with USC is similar to Texas. I think they've got unrealistic expectations. And you look back, with the exception of the Pete Carroll era, not really a dominant program. I mean, you've got to go back to the 70s to think about, when OJ's there, and the 60s for when they were really in their heyday, with the exception of when Pete Carroll was there. Washington State, I think, is a tier down from both of those schools. And then TCU, I think this is going to be a really interesting offseason for them, because what does the coaching pool at the top, how do they view TCU with the new Big 12? Is that more considered a Group of Five type of school now, which is going to pain TCU fans to hear stuff like that? But you lost Texas and OU, and you are in what is now just a souped up Group of Five conference now, not really a Power Five conference anymore. So do the top coaches want to be there anymore? I mean, you do. It is a talent-rich area, and you've got brand new facilities, but you're also not playing in the SEC or the Big Ten or even the Pac-12. LSU, to me, is still one of the top jobs in college football. Again, you've got everything you could possibly want there, and an extremely passionate fan base. But that's the good side of it. The bad side, if it's a bad side, there's a lot of pressure there, and some coaches would maybe take the easier road and say, I'll still get paid plenty to go somewhere that it's not the same expectations. Because again, at a place like LSU, you can see how quickly it goes against you. They want one thing, and it's to beat Saban, beat Alabama, and get into the Final Four. Anything less than that, year in and year out, is going to be underwhelming, and they're going to replace you after 2 or 3 years.
Last thing for you, Taylor, the college football playoff rankings, they came out again this week. No change at the top, but I am curious how they're setting this thing up. Keeping Alabama at number 2. And we've seen Alabama, they blow out New Mexico State, they don't move. They play a close game with LSU, playing LSU's second and third stringers, they don't move. It seems like them keeping Alabama at number 2 with one loss already is setting up for, man, if they play a close game with Georgia in the SEC title game, let's say they lose by a field goal, are you going to drop Bama that far? Since you've had them at 2 this whole time, how are you going to drop them to 5 or 6, if they lose a close game to the number 1 team? I think they're setting this thing up where even if Bama loses a close game to Georgia in the SEC title game, they may still keep them top 4 ahead of the likes of teams like Cincinnati and maybe some other conference champions.
Yeah, the odds right now per Vegas has Alabama still with a very good shot of getting in. So, the guys that really know what they're talking about are expecting, what it's saying is the teams that are in the back half of the top 10, you're expecting them to get another loss or 2. I look at, Oklahoma State as a dark horse, where if they run the table as a 1-loss champion and they beat OU and then they beat likely Baylor in the Big 12 championship, they would get in. And that's a team nobody's talking about. But a 1-loss Big 12 champion where their only loss is Iowa State on the road by a field goal, that team is getting in for the most part. There's a couple exceptions, but I think they would get in. Now, Vegas is saying they expect OU to win that game. Potentially OU loses a second game, and you have these 2-loss conference champions where that's the scenario Alabama gets in as a 2-loss non-conference champion. I think also, you've got a situation here potentially where Cincinnati runs the table and they get to 13-0. They're a conference champion, but it's been underwhelming. Their conference schedule this year has not been very impressive. Do you put a 2-loss non-conference champion Alabama in over an undefeated Cincinnati? I think they probably do. I think, again, it goes back to Cincinnati being underwhelming. So you've got, Michigan State, they're going to have their crack at Ohio State. If they were to beat them, does Michigan get in as a 1-loss Big Ten champion? Yeah, absolutely. Ohio State is the one I think is likely that ends up at 2. I think Oregon, this is their big week at Utah. If they lose, the Pac-12 is done. They're not going to get a 2-loss Pac-12 champion in. So all of these scenarios that I'm talking about lead to there's a pretty good chance that Alabama, even with 2 losses and their best win being Ole Miss, they probably get in, because there's a good chance you've got, Wake Forest likely loses again. Your ACC champions at 2 losses, your Pac-12 champions at 2 losses. All of this helps Alabama to be the first 2-loss team to get into the Final Four, and again, a non-conference champion.
Taylor McHargue, college football analyst. Taylor, thanks so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it.
You as well, guys. Talk to y'all next week.
All right, there we go. Taylor McHargue, college football analyst, joining us there. That is just about going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Again, my thanks to Taylor for joining us. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. We'll be back on Monday. Full reaction to Week 12 of the SEC. And, it's sad. It's going to be the start of the final regular season week of the college football season, of the SEC season. Boo! We'll talk about it all. We'll react to everything we see this weekend. I'm Chris Gordy. We'll talk to you guys on Monday right here on Locked On SEC. Have a great weekend, everybody.